Welcome to the Byline Breakdown, where we go behind the headlines with the journalists who bring stories to life. I'm Mike Moliterno. Today we're joined by Deanne Johnson, whose recent work on the memorials of the Mahoning Valley offers a glimpse into how we remember our veterans and the impact of community heritage. As Veterans Day is approaching, I thought, Deanne, it would be appropriate to talk about these stories. You wrote 2 for our most recent issue. I'd just like to kind of recap them real quick.
Sure.
For our listeners. So the first story you wrote takes us into the heart of downtown Youngstown and talks about the Man on the Monument, which stands as a testament to Civil War soldiers. Its presence now somewhat obscured by the bustle of modern life. Yet your piece is not just about the monument and the inscriptions. It's also about memory and recognition and the ongoing dialogue between the past and the present. Then in your second story, we get to kind of travel along with Gerald Nunziato, who's uncovering the lost histories of Smoky Hollow's war heroes, whose names are adorning a local war memorial. This is a story of dedication and discovery, and you follow along as Nunziato goes on sort of a 10-year quest to bridge the gap between generations and ensure that those who served are not forgotten. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Deanne, welcome to the show. Could you just start by telling us a little bit about what drew you to these stories or what you found appealing when you began working on them?
Yeah. So veterans stories and Veterans Day is kind of close to my heart, actually. My grandfather, Charlie Reese, served in World War II. He was an airplane mechanic in the South Pacific, and he didn't talk a lot about his service, but my grandmother told me years later that he was stationed at first learning the trade, what they needed him to know in Biloxi, Mississippi area, and she went down and worked there. They were newlyweds, and she went down and worked there as a person that worked with codes. And then when he was sent overseas, she drove home pregnant with my mom, no driver's license, anything, just drove home by herself because they had driven down together. So I find the stories of veterans and some of the pictures of the veterans that I talked about with Gerald and the faces that he showed me, and even some of the pictures of the Golden Eagle Club. Those guys would have been just like my grandfather. So I found it very intriguing to go back and hear some of their stories because I know our family history story that we've passed down.
Right. It's actually kind of interesting. So both of my grandfathers served in World War II. My grandfather on my father's side actually volunteered to go because his younger nephew was drafted. So he was quite older, and the nephew's mother was very worried about her son, obviously. So he volunteered to take his place so that he wouldn't have to go. And they shipped my grandfather off to the Pacific, and then I guess he would be my great uncle, signed up for the military and went to World War II anyway. Yeah, and his mother almost killed him because they both came back. They both came back safe, but it was quite an interesting story. So let's talk about the Man on the Monument, which you mentioned is often overlooked by residents. It's right here in downtown Youngstown in the central square. So what did you find during your reporting that were some of the biggest challenges to keeping these memories alive and keeping the memories of what these monuments represent alive?
Right. So I came here to the Business Journal about 16, 17 months ago, and until I walked through downtown, I drove right past that monument many times and didn't really notice that it was there or couldn't really tell what it was. So I think there was a lot of discussion that was a centralized place. And if you look at old pictures of Youngstown, that whole square was clear. It was like a big circle, and it stood way up above everything. And now it's dwarfed by those trees and everything. It's still a huge monument, but it's dwarfed by those trees. So I think they put it there thinking everyone would see it. And I believe Amy Fluker also made that point from YSU, who I had spoken to about that monument, that they thought it was centralized, that people would be going by there every day. And now I don't know that there's a lot of people that walk right past that monument. Some, but not probably as many as used to be back in the day when there was so much more hustle and bustle downtown.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the trees. I walk past it quite frequently, and I have to admit I'm guilty of just not even realizing that it's there. Even though I know it's there, it kind of blends in with all of the other trees and all of the other the scenery around, and I just it's real easy not to notice it. Could you talk a little bit about what was your process for researching these memorials and finding out the stories behind them?
Yeah, I started off by making a list and realizing that there was so much more behind it than just a list. And, just kind of researching what some of the different places in the community and throughout the Mahoning Valley did. They all seem to have a monument or a placard, or they're all over the place. But there's a lot of those that, even when you talk to experts, like Amy Fluker says that she feels like she's an expert in the Civil War monuments, but there's some of them, she said, I really don't know why they put that there. They're interesting, but nobody kept track of the stories as to why they're there. Right.
So you talk about some of the stories have been forgotten, and your stories mention Amy Fluker, who you just mentioned, as well as Gerald Nunziato. And these are people who are trying to make sure that those stories aren't forgotten. So I guess, how did those people play into your narrative, and how did they kind of shape it a little bit?
Yeah, I would say, especially with Gerald, he's very concerned that when he was younger, he would go to these Memorial Day services that were held at the monument in Smoky Hollow, but they were names they didn't have that were on there. They didn't have a lot of meaning to him, and he is concerned that there's a lot of monuments like that in the valley that have a list of names on them that nobody remembers, or that the story behind that person or their service, their dedication to this country has been forgotten.
Could you just tell us a little bit about what Mr. Nunziato is doing, or
Sure.
Kind of the whole Smoky Hollow bit?
Sure. So when Gerald Nunziato was a child, his father was in the Golden Eagle Club. In fact, his father at one point became president of the Golden Eagle Club. The Golden Eagle Club decided at some point that they were going to honor the members, the people from Smoky Hollow, the community up in that area between Wick and Walnut area.
Yeah, it's over by YSU.
YSU.
Right by MVR, that neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they decided that the people who were from that neighborhood, they were going to honor them, and they put up a Smoky Hollow memorial to the soldiers that were there. Gerald was just a little boy, and there's a picture of him in our issue that he has where he was there when they dedicated it. But through the years, he left the area. He went and had a career, and then he retired and returned to the area and realized he was very interested in preserving these stories. So he started in researching, going back through those names. And in fact, there was even a name that they were adding when they read off the names during the Memorial Day service that wasn't there. And he asked about it. Why are we adding this name? Who is this person? And they said it's someone whose family says that he should have been on there, but he wasn't. Mm-hmm. There was also someone that was on there, and it turned out after he looked into it a little bit, it was the wrong first name. It was the right last name, but it was the wrong first name. The gentleman who was actually listed there had returned and died a few years after the war, but the gentleman who had died overseas had not returned, and they had put the wrong first name. But a lot of the boys, if you look back at old photos of from Smoky Hollow, the Golden Eagle Club, and all that, they all went by nicknames. They all have a nickname with their first name. So a lot of people probably didn't know his first name very well.
Right.
They knew him by his nickname.
Anything surprising that you came across when researching these?
I don't know about surprising. I know I was intrigued by some of the smaller monument things, like when I went to the Mahoning Valley Historical Society, and they had a Hall of Fame placard there, and it had the pictures of each of the employees, like their employee badges that they turned in when they went overseas. I found it, very, you look at how many faces were there, and I don't know how many people worked at that mill at that point in time, but there's so many faces there that you had to have known most of the people or many of the people whose faces ended up there. And, there were 5 that they posted prominently in the middle that didn't come back.
We're going to take a quick break before we continue speaking with Deanne, so stay with us on the Byline Breakdown, and we'll be right back to delve deeper into the stories behind the monuments of the Mahoning Valley.
Attention all business enthusiasts in Northeast Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. The Business Journal has been your trusted partner since 1984, giving insights, updates, and fostering growth in your region. From Mahoning to Mercer, from Columbiana to Lawrence, we've got you covered. For just $10 a month or $99 a year, unlock our digital troves, or get both print and digital for only $99 a year. Make the smart business choice. Subscribe now.
Deanne, could you maybe describe for us or share with us how you think these memorials intersect with some of the ways that we remember and honor veterans today?
So a lot of the memorials were, of course, made out of something very permanent, stone, granite, something solid. A lot of times nowadays we seem to put signs on bridges, which are large, not permanent, but semi-permanent structures. That bridge is probably going to be there for a long time. We honor a lot of different, not just people at this point, but groups of veterans, Purple Heart veterans, folks that were wounded, or maybe one specific veteran that left that community and didn't come back, received a medal. I would say that the monuments, instead of being stone at this point, are becoming more diversified at this point.
Your work also touches on sort of the evolving nature of memorials, as you're saying. Mm-hmm. How do you think that this is impacting the way communities engage with their history?
Yeah, so I think that it's good when they get younger folks involved. For instance, I live in East Palestine. When they have Memorial Day services, the band will come along. They might have a kid come along who's going to read something. But they try to also have a parade every year so that lots of age groups get involved. I think it's important to involve young people in remembering what has happened and remembering the veterans. The schools often have Veterans Day tributes in some of the schools that I've covered in the past, where they will read things. They'll have breakfast with the veterans and let them know how much they care about their service. And I think that's important so that we don't forget what they gave.
We'll go back to Gerald Nunziato, who's really been working quite tirelessly at this. I guess, what could we take away as a society or just as residents of the Mahoning Valley? What could we take away from his example?
Yeah, so he has more than 1,400 pages of research dedicated to these soldiers' lives. And he would tell you it doesn't take somebody who majored in research, or it's not hard to do, but he feels it's very important. A lot of the young men, especially, he's now gone back and done World War I, even though they aren't on the Smoky Hollow Memorial, and he hopes someday that they will be able to put up a memorial with the names of the folks from World War I. And he's gone back and researched them, and he says that so many very sad stories, but people need to know that. People need to remember that there were people who gave their entire life. They didn't have, most of them had no children, no family, no wife, no legacy after they were gone other than that they had served. And so they could be easily forgotten.
Well, I think too, when this is just me, but when we think of veterans, you almost get a picture of an old man in your head. And you have to remind yourself that many of these at the time were 18-year-old men or boys.
Yeah.
Fresh out of high school with all of the immaturities that come with being an 18-year-old man, So it is interesting, as you said, many of them gave their entire lives. This person would have had a wife, a child, children, grandchildren, this whole story that never came to be, So I just think that's interesting. That's something that I thought of when we were
going back to my own story. My grandfather came back, and if he had not, I would never have had my aunt, my cousin. That side of the family would have never happened had he not come back.
Right.
So it could have been so easy.
As you've delved into these stories, I guess, what did you learn about the nature of memory, and I guess, what message do you hope the people who read your stories take away from them?
I hope moving forward, I know that there was controversy in Vietnam, and we've had long, drawn-out wars in the Gulf, and I hope moving forward we don't forget to memorialize some of the heroes from that era as well. There have been a few go up, but there hasn't been that many when you think about it compared to how many we have from the Civil War, World War I, World War II. And I really hope we go back and don't forget those folks going forward.
Well, thank you very much, Deanne. It has been very enlightening, and the stories are great. I really enjoyed reading them. We'll be back next Thursday with another episode of the Byline Breakdown. I'm Mike Moliterno.
You wouldn't drive a car without a map, so why navigate the business world of northeastern Ohio and western Pennsylvania without the Business Journal? Trusted since 1984, we're the compass pointing you to growth and prosperity. Digital, print, why not both? We've got subscription options tailored for every business-savvy individual. Light up your path to success. Subscribe to the Business Journal today.